So I've done videos on natural law before, but I think it's important to devote a whole series to this topic because it's something that I think is crucially important to resurrect in the public discourse. And that's because much of public discourse is tainted by an inability to discuss morality with any kind of robust ontological grounding, which I think is largely due to the is-ought gap, which isolates morality into its own realm of reality confined to human intentionality and the consequences which flow from it. As such, the rule and measure of human morality ceases to have harmony with the cosmos in which man finds himself, but instead becomes a purely rationalistic endeavor to align human action with artificially constructed social goods in order to produce the best outcome. So, I thought what I would do through the course of a few videos here is to discuss what are the foundations that underlie the natural law tradition, and how do they help to guard against this impotency in moral discourse, which by its very nature seems to force us to check the very ontology of human nature at the door before making an acceptable, morally binding argument concerning various issues, which happen to pertain to all sorts of dimensions of human nature, whether it be its gendered dimension, its procreative dimension, its rational dimension, etc. So at the most fundamental core of the problem here, and this is what this entire video is going to be about, is the rejection, either implicit or explicit, of the convertibility of goodness and being. That is, the principle that goodness and being do not differ from each other in actual reality, but only in idea. The rejection of this Thomistic principle is essentially, I would say, synonymous with the is-ought gap, which rules out the possibility of deriving moral obligations or oughts from the natures of things as they truly are. When that is rejected, it necessarily becomes inadmissible to appeal to human nature in order to argue for this or that moral proposition. As a result of this, it becomes very difficult to defend moral norms that we used to all take for granted, such as preserving intact the sexual act with its procreative dimension, the differentiated roles of men and women in society, or even the inherent wrongness of intentionally killing innocent life. If it's no longer admissible to appeal to the being of human nature, and instead we have to argue on the grounds of some other standard, usually to the consequences of particular actions, then the justification for condemning these moral evils becomes burdensome at best and impossible at worst. So, what does it really mean to say that goodness and being are convertible, and how is this to be defended? I should address two misconceptions first. First of all, it's important to keep in mind that this is not to say that goodness and being are just synonymous terms that just mean the same thing completely interchangeably. Now, in idea, they do refer to different ratios of thought. That is, being refers to something as actual, and goodness refers to something as desirable or inclined towards as a perfective end. The meaning of these two principles are obviously different in that the actual being of, say, an acorn can be recognized as true with or without the acorn realizing its perfective end to become an oak. Goodness, obviously, therefore, it adds something to our knowledge of a thing subsequent to recognizing the thing as existing. What is being claimed instead is that these two aspects of reality come together in transcendental unity, and being is the more fundamental of the two, and itself signifies that unity in a way that goodness does not. More on this later. Now, on the second misconception, it should be kept in mind that the argument here is not implying that everything under the sun is somehow good, just because we can say that it exists in just any unqualified manner whatsoever. Murder, for example, can in a certain sense be said to exist insofar as it's a discernible reality perceivable to the senses. But of course, existence in this context is being used in a very loose sense, and it is in a much more refined manner that existence is considered within this view of the world. And according to this sense of existence, murder does not exist per se, but falls short of existence, because its presence in the world is only discernible through a lack of a do-good, i.e., life taken in the absence of justice. So, to get at what is truly meant by the convertibility of goodness and being, we have to tie it to a concept that is inescapably and invariably recognized in relation to virtually any concept of goodness whatsoever, and that is perfection. So, to say something is good, or that it is better or worse, which is the measure of goodness in degrees, is necessarily to say that it is more or less perfect. A good moral act is one that, at the very least, can be intelligibly recognized as more or less perfect according to whatever standard of goodness that one is going to employ. But what is perfection? I would submit that it is impossible to conceive of perfection without drawing an essential relationship to being or existence. Now, I've used this example many times before, but it's always illustrative, and I'll go into greater depth with it here than I have in past videos. But consider triangularity or circularity. To say a circle is more or less perfect is always to consider its relationship to whatever geometrical definition befits its nature. That is, it is measured by actuality or being. A thing's nature is that form whereby a thing is that which it is. And the degree to which an individuated material subject conforms to that receptive form tells us the degree to which its existence is actualized or has realized being. So existence here is not reducible to the static verification of a thing in reality, which admits purely to a binary either-or. There is, of course, a sense in which it is that, insofar as we refer to the initial reception of the act of being, but that initial reception does not by itself get to the bottom of the act of being. The act of existence is not reducible to a static fact. It is a dynamic energy, an activity. And as an activity, indeed the act of all acts, it must be understood as acting towards a term, an end point. That is, the actualization as to a thing's whole substance. And the degree to which the act of existence achieves its full realization in a thing is what we would refer to a thing's perfection, since it is the measure of the realization of a thing's perfective ends as inclined toward by the thing's very being. Therein lies the convertibility of being and goodness, as well as the priority of being to goodness. In other words, goodness just is what we would nominally give the label to this phenomenon, that is, the act of existence as inclined toward the fulfillment of its realization in the essence or nature which receives the act of existence. Hence, St. Thomas says, goodness takes on the character of an end. It is the inclination of a thing towards its perfective end determined by its nature to complete its act of existence, which is the source of this teleological inclination. But it is the act of existence, the act of being, which is the source and bedrock of this perfective inclination in a thing. As such, we must look to the thing's essential nature which receives its act of existence to discern what those perfective ends truly are, and those will give us the insight into what is truly good or evil for the given thing. Human nature is no different. It is not an exception to this universal metaphysical rule. It would be an unjustified anthropomorphism to isolate humanity from this universal metaphysical law of reality. The only qualitative difference with humanity is that humans are endowed with intellect and will. This endowment, though, it does not excuse humanity from the metaphysics of the good common to the rest of reality. On the contrary, it emboldens it, and imposes itself on humanity all the more firmly with the force of characteristically moral gravity. The endowment of intellect and will is what adds the layer of morality to the goodness of human nature, but it does not change the means whereby that goodness is discerned. It simply confirms it and binds it on man, who, unlike the rest of material creation, has the capacity to knowingly and willingly direct his actions toward harmony with the good of his nature, which is discerned through the same channel through which we discern the good of everything else in reality. And that is the perfective ends of a thing's intrinsic nature. Only when we source morality in this broader metaphysical conception of the good can we safely advance arguments from human nature without appealing to emotion, divine law, or personal intuition. But of course, that being and goodness are convertible is only one aspect of this. This argument can really only get off the ground if we concede that there are, in fact, common natures that are the sources of these perfective ends, the realization of which is the completion of the act of existence in a thing, thereby bringing it into harmony with the divine existence, of which it is a finite participation. So, in the next video, I'm going to give an in-depth defense of essentialism, as natural law would be nothing without it. We have to actually establish the existence of common natures in order to defend natural law. It only makes sense if we can recognize the existence of common natures. So, I hope you liked this video. If you did, leave a like, subscribe. This last month has been pretty busy getting back into the swing of the semester and everything, but I should be uploading regularly again. Next video should be my first take on the essence-energies distinction as part of my Answering the Orthodox series, so stay tuned for that. God bless.